So, today we're going to explore a very important question, which is why should Lee Strobel and Jay Warner Wallace have all the fun? Welcome to the first episode of a series I like to call Analyst Ring versus the Bible, where I pull a Lee Strobel / Jay Warner Wallace and draw on my experience as a military intelligence analyst to look at the Bible as through the lens of it as a historical document. Now, first disclaimer, this is bad scholarship. I will be drawing specifically on the Bible as a document in and of itself. And in doing so, I am doing what all good fundagelical apologists do and using the Bible as my only source. Like I said, big disclaimer, this is bad scholarship. I will reiterate this in every episode, but I'm doubly doing it so for the pilot and setting the ground rules. That being said, I will be being a bad fundagelical apologist in that I will be observing the Bible as a equivalent historical document to other historical documents of the time, and in such I will be discounting supernatural claims as propagandistic embellishments. Like, for example, we know Justinian existed. Justinian probably wasn't a headless devil that wandered about the palace at night, which is more likely. He was really a headless devil, or Procopius wanted to have a backup in case of a sudden violent regime change. Any supernatural events within the Bible that are not regarded as propagandistic embellishments will be disregarded as mytho-history and will thus not fall under the purview of this examination. For example, here's the entirety of the Pentateuch and Joshua with a little bit of Judges. The Israelite equivalent of, say, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Just because Troy's there doesn't mean a bunch of gods were zipping around, helping the Aegeans versus the Trojans. Now, I may draw back onto some, parts of the Pentateuch and Joshua for cultural context. But largely what I view as the historical record of the Bible starts roughly in Samuel. Ruth is mundane enough to be viewed as historical, but is only really important in a socio-political context because it's the story of David's grandma. Now, Judges is a bit hit and miss. Some of the stories are very much likely just straight on mytho-history, but I can see it as kind of a gray area between strictly mytho-history and largely historical. I plan to be starting in Samuel, but if you guys want to see bits of Judges first, go ahead and comment in the comments below to let me know that you want to see bits of Judges first. Now, one final disclaimer, this is very much going through a Christian or a ex-Christian lens, so blanket apologies to any Jewish people who are watching, this is strictly through a Christian / ex-Christian lens. As like I said, I'm pulling a Lee Strobel / Jay Warner Wallace, but in reverse, and this is not intended to be considered any kind of authoritative scholarship. This is basically reverse apologetics for fun. So with that, we'll start with a taste of what I mean by pulling from the Book of Judges. I never thought I'd say this, but thank you to Ray Comfort for accidentally pushing me onto the right reference, because I thought this verse was in Joshua. When I went to look it up in Joshua, I turns out the verse I was looking for was in Judges. So a little bit of never thought I'd be thanking Ray Comfort for anything. So without further ado, Judges 1, starting in verse 17. And Judah went with Simeon his brother, and they slew the Canaanites that inhabited Zaphath, and utterly destroyed it. And the name of the city was called Hormath. And Judah took Gaza with the coast thereof, and Askelon with the coast thereof, and Ekron with the coast thereof. And the Lord was with Judah, and he drave out the inhabitants of the mountains, but could not drive the inhabitants of the valley, or plain, depending on your translation, because they had chariots of iron. Now, military analyst hat on. The key verse there is the ending verse of Judges 1:19. Where Judah was strong and prevailed in the mountains, but could not prevail in the plains or in the valley, depending on the translation, because the inhabitants of the plains had chariots of iron. Now, and I apologize to Napoleon, but, to Napoleon Bonaparte, but unfortunately, the field artillery has not been invented yet, so at least when we're coming down to flat level terrain, the king of battle in these days, in the time period of this, that this is supposedly taking place, is the chariot. There is a stark difference between the, warfare in steep, varied elevation type terrain and warfare out on a flat open plain. In rocky, rough terrain, your positioning is a lot more important, but on an open field, flat plain, it's momentum and movement that is a lot more important when it comes to warfare. And the chariot was essentially the field artillery of that time, or rather the tank of the day, where it was a mobile archery platform. So, not only could you zoom across the battlefield, but you could do so pinging people across the battlefield left and right, or rather your archer could. Now, that, and it is a tried and true staple of warfare, of military history, where generally speaking, the side with the better technology tends to win. And the reason I say tends to win is because there are plenty of counterexamples where, through the use of guerrilla tactics and other tactical maneuvers, and a lesser technologically advanced military force will be able to will be able to overwhelm and win against the more advanced force. However, Judah's, the tribe of Judah is doing very well in mountain combat. So they are doing very well with their strategic and tactical positioning. However, warfare on the plains is different. Warfare on the plains, where you need more, you have more room to move around, and thus, if you can't outmaneuver, you can't outmaneuver a chariot on foot. You can't and there's a lot less cover and concealment to ambush something like a chariot, especially if you've got a chariot driver and an archer, taking pot shots at your squad, at your army, just zipping around the battlefield. So, and this is why we see, the phalanx being developed in Greece, because the terrain in Greece is very rocky, and so, it's easier to just anchor yourself against the landmark and just push the other army out of the way, or, encircle around the army, just by levering your force against theirs. It's, very blocky, very positional method of warfare. But when you get to, steppe peoples like the Huns and the Mongols, more famously, you have those people favoring very mobile, very cavalry-centric methods of warfare, because out on flat, open terrain, you're going to be able to see your enemy coming from miles. And so speed and mobility and being able to reach out and smack them, speed, mobility, and range are more important in plain warfare. So, that's why you see the chariot dominating warfare this period in, flat open country, whereas later the Greeks, will have their phalanx, and we don't really see the phalanx beginning to dominate as much in the Middle East until Alexander the Great Alexander the Horse-Liver comes along and mixes the phalanx tactics with a strong cavalry support, where you have that mobility to outmaneuver the other army and pin them against the phalanx. And that's why we see in European warfare, cavalry is largely used as a shock troop, mentioned, as to break up a phalanx, because for the most part, Europe, middle-aged Europe took their military tactics and doctrine from Rome, which took their military doctrine from Greece. And so, that being said, Judah's army is also fighting on unfamiliar. It's fair to say that Judah's army is fighting on unfamiliar terrain, and there's only one military commander that I can think of that managed to win a guerrilla fight on unfamiliar terrain, and that was the mad lad who marched, elephants across the freaking Alps. Shout out to Hannibal Barca. And so that's a taste of the kind of analysis, on more military passages. I'm going to be, looking at it through a military angle. However, when you get into things like Samuel, and and kings. There's a lot of socio-political stuff going on, so you're going to see that side of Analyst Ring going into those sections. And one last little, bit, because Bible Hub had, because of cross-referencing is fun, we do have a contradiction in that passage later on, as it says in Judges that Judah takes Jerusalem, but allowed the Jebusites or couldn't take Jerusalem and allowed the Jebusites to stay there in that day, until this day, i.e. until David comes in later and, manages to take Jerusalem. But in Joshua, we have a nearly identical verse where it's actually the tribe of Benjamin that tries to and fails to extract the Jebusites from Jerusalem. So, fun little extra tidbit of Bible contradiction in there. And with that, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. Seriously, comment and let me know if you want me to get into the portions of Judges where I find them were, historical enough to be worth analyzing on a socio-political or military level. For instance, the story of Gideon, I feel that that's historical enough to look into on a military basis. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to start with Samuel and work my way up through Acts, because that's about, what will be, historical in terms of, the Bible as historical record. And remember, indoctrination is a hell of a drug. Oh, I thought it was a nightmare, going across so smooth. They tell me don't go walking slow, the devil's on the loose. You better run through the jungle, better run through the jungle. You better run through the jungle, and don't you look back, you see.